Hi there everyone, and welcome to this next lab on Windows Server and Geo. Today we're going to be having a look at Windows Deployment Services. Now if you haven't ever heard of it, Windows Deployment Services is a pretty convenient tool and pretty convenient role to have on your server. This is because it allows you to basically install your Windows images on any computer in your network quickly and easily. So say for example, if you've got a load of computers, for example in an office, you could basically install their operating systems over the network. So that would of course save you a lot of time, a lot of hassle. You wouldn't have to go to each computer and put a disk in or a USB. And you can also make your own custom images as well to upload to your Windows deployment server. So you can have all your software, and generally it's also a good idea to sysprep the images. To get started with Windows deployment services, you want to just go to your start menu and just open up your server manager. It's allowed to refresh here. Go to the Manage tab and select Add Roles and Features. Click Next and then select Role-Based or Feature-Based Installation. Select your server. And then from the list of roles, select Windows Deployment Services. Add the required features. Select Next. You don't need any additional features. Okay, so a couple of things to note here. So deployment servers requires that DHCP and DNS services are available on your network. So to basically put it in a nutshell, most home routers, if you're using this in a home lab, most home routers will have a DHCP server built into them. And DNS, of course, is probably going to be provided by your ISP if you're using this in a home situation. So select Next. And then select Install. So then we'll just allow this to install. So while we wait for this to install, we'll go over what other things we're going to need. If we just minimize this here, we're going to need an image of a Windows installation media as well. So here I have the installation media for Windows Server 2019 here, and we're going to need two files off of it. If we open it up, we can mount the image. Go into the sources folder here, and we need to find two files, boot.wim and install.wim. Now basically Windows Deployment Services works off of Windows images. What you do is you put these Windows images on your server. You have either a boot or an installation image. So if we go and have a look at our boot image here, this basically provides an environment that we can boot the computer into. So we use something called PXE, Pre-Boot Execution Environment. Basically this allows you to boot any computer on your network off of this server, and you can run basically anything you want. But in this case, with Windows Deployment Services, we'll be using a boot image here. So that provides you with the environment to actually install the operating system. And of course the install file here, if I just quickly go to it, basically this is the operating system itself. So this is your Windows, basically this is Windows. So if we return to our server manager here, you can see that the installation has succeeded. So we'll just close that, go into the start menu, and then under Windows Administrative Tools, scroll down and find Windows Deployment Services. Now we're going to have to configure our server before we can do anything. So go onto the servers and then right click your server here and go to configure server. Okay, so a couple of things here. So as we've mentioned earlier, we need DHCP and DNS. Most cases these would already be set up for you in your home environment, but if you are in a large corporation you may need to consider those yourself. Of course we have an NTFS file system. That's our main operating system hard drive. And also we can configure it to be a member of Active Directory as well. If you do this you get extra features, but in my case I don't really find that much use to me personally. So we'll just select this standalone here. Now here's your basically path where you're going to store all your images. Now it's best practice to store all your images on a separate hard drive partition or maybe a separate storage device as a whole. You can, however, use your local drive, and as you can see you'll get a warning saying for best performance use an external, use another volume or something. But you can do that, and we are going to select that just for now because this is a virtual machine. So here now you have your Pixie server settings. So you also install the Pixie server with Windows deployment services as well. What you want to do is you want to basically, in the home lab, you want to select that to respond to all client computers. Now this is kind of a security consideration, but in a small environment you shouldn't really have to worry about that much. And then it's just copy files. Okay, so now that's done, we can of course already add our images. We can start adding the images right away. But we're not going to select that for now because we're just going to walk through what we can actually do. So right here we have various things we can look at here. So the first thing you want to do is go into boot images. Right click, add boot image. And what it will need you to do is you'll need to browse for your boot image. So we've already mounted our Windows installation media here. So you can find that in sources, and you want to select boot.wim. Click next, and you can already see it says Microsoft Windows Setup 64-bit. So we'll just leave that name like that. Then we'll add that boot image to the server. Okay, so now that's finished, we'll just click finish here. And as you can see, we already have this selected as our boot image here. So we can add more of these if we want to at a later date. And what you'll have is, if you add more of these, when you Pixie boot the client computer, you'll actually be able to select what one you want to use. But we won't have that for the time being because there's only one image. Next we need to go to install images. And we can add an install image. So we'll just leave that in the default image group here. But you can basically group together your images in any way you want really. So we'll browse for our install image, go back to our mounted disk image, select install.wim because that's our install image, and this is going to take a little bit longer because it's a bigger file. So click continue, and basically we can see all the additions of Windows that are included in this image here. So if we expand on the name here a bit, so you can see we can see server standard core, server standard, server data center core, and server data center. So we can basically select which ones we want to include. So I'll deselect the core ones here, and we will probably only want data center in this case. Or you can just basically select any one you want. This option here, by default that's enabled, but if we uncheck that, we're actually able to rename our image. So let's rename this Windows Server 2019 Data Center. And we can put any description we want, so I'm going to put installation. Click next. So basically what this will do is this will copy the image file from the disk onto your remote installation folder, wherever you've chosen to put that. Okay, so now that operation is complete, we'll just click finish. And now you can see the installer image right here. So if we double click on that, we can view some information. So we can see the expanded size of the image here, when it was created. We can rename it anytime we want. View various informations and adjust our permissions. Don't really need to worry about that. So now that's completed, we need to configure our Pixie server. We need to select what options we want to use. So right click on our server again and go to properties. Go to boot here, and as you can see our Pixie boot policy. So we can basically require the user to push the F12 key to continue our Pixie boot. That's always good practice to have that enabled. And you can select that if you have unknown and known clients. You can provide a default boot image as well in case you don't want to select your own boot image from the list if you have, and this is really good if you have multiple boot images you want to use. Okay, so now that's completed, we'll move over to our client machine here and we'll see what we have. Okay, so now we're at our client computer here. If we just start it up, I will access the virtual machine's boot menu here, and we want to select option number 4, network boot. And any moment now will ask us to push F12. Once we've done that, as you can see here, it's now loading the boot image we supplied earlier. As you can see, boot.wim. And what this is doing is it's loading this boot image from the server. So right now it's downloading this and it's about to boot into the Windows pre-installation environment, and it will allow us to install our images. So as you can see, we've got the server's IP address here and the progress of this operation. So we'll just let that run through. Okay, and as you can see, it's now booting into the Windows pre-installation environment here. So this is basically downloaded that from the server using the image we provided earlier. Okay, and as you can see, it kind of looks like the normal Windows setup. However, it looks a little bit different. We have Windows deployment services instead. So it's asking us to select our keyboard and language information, so we'll just provide that. Okay, so what we have to do here now is we need to provide our username and password for the server. So we have to provide this in the format of domain or computer name / username. So especially if your computer name like mine is a bit long, but we'll just have to provide that. It's basically the username and password you use to log into the server. Okay, so once we provided that information, we now get the images. So we've only provided one installation image, Windows Server 2019 Data Center. But basically any image that you provide, you can select it from here. We can see when it was modified, the language, and the CPU architecture it was made for. And we can also see our description here, so we just named it installation there. Clicking next will ask you where you want to install the operating system. So we can manage our partitions here, we can make a new partition for the whole thing. Wait for the server, and now it's basically going to install Windows using the files from the server. So what it's going to do is going to download that installer image, it's going to copy it onto this local machine, and it's going to basically apply that image to the computer. So we can install the operating system. And then from here, it's basically going to continue as a normal Windows installation. So that's definitely something very useful to have in a large environment when you've got loads of different computers that need installing Windows on them. You can run as many computers as you want here. The speed of this is dependent on your network. It runs relatively fast on the 10100 Ethernet network, but it will of course run better on your gigabit. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial today, and I'll see you in the next one.